With the escalation of hostilities between Israel and Iran, the death toll mounts. The stakes for the world have risen and the level of political and media obfuscation has reached new lows. Once more, it's Israel's very existence that's under threat. And while Israel defends itself, it's also defending the civilised world from the horrendous threats of Islamist terrorism and nuclear catastrophe. But rather than support Israel or thank Israel or, God forbid, help Israel, so many world leaders and most of the media are trying not to take a side, actually pretending there's some kind of equivalence between the evil and deadly warmongering of Iran and the targeted self-defence of Israel. In fact, Israel is doing the world a huge favour. At minutes to midnight, it's targeted Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, taking out centrifuge installations in the Iranian desert capable of producing fuel for nuclear weapons, and taking out the nuclear scientists and defence officials crucial to the weapons program. The end result here is the one that most of the civilised world has agreed on for years. In fact, it's a job that Barack Obama said he'd completed 10 years ago.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, good one, President. Just like his claim to have cooled the planet, this was just bluster from Obama. The US left that deal and Iran has ignored sanctions and it's powered on with its nuclear ambitions. And if you don't like Donald Trump and if you don't like Benjamin Netanyahu, then listen to Barack Obama explain what's at stake.
Now, that doesn't mean that this deal will resolve all of our differences with Iran. We share the concerns expressed by many of our friends in the Middle East, including Israel and the Gulf states, about Iran's support for terrorism and its use of proxies to destabilize the region. But that is precisely why we are taking this step. Because an Iran armed with a nuclear weapon would be far more destabilizing and far more dangerous to our friends and to the world.
OK, so that's it. The aim of stopping Iran getting nuclear weapons is the aim of Barack Obama. It happens to be the aim of Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Anthony Albanese. I mean, it's the stated aim of just about every civilised country on the planet. But the point is, they all failed to make good on it. They talked, they did deals, they played around with sanctions. And meanwhile, Iran kept going with its nuclear program. So while Iran funded and prompted Hamas to attack Israel from the south 20 months ago, and Iran funded and prompted Hezbollah to attack Israel from the north, and Iran funded and prompted the Houthis to attack Israel from the east, and after Iran directly attacked Israel itself, and after President Trump gave Iran 60 days to do a deal to give up its nuclear weapons ambitions, well then last week, on day 61, Israel launched its attack. Israel could never let Iran get nuclear weapons. Why? Well, because Iran is committed to eliminating Israel from the face of the planet. Here are some scenes from Iran just last week. Yeah, while the world played around with failed diplomacy, Israel could not leave any of this to chance. On my trip to Israel last month, the main question we discussed with security experts is when there would be an attack on Iran's nuclear program and whether it would be the US or Israel who launched it. This is the crucial issue we've discussed on this program for years.
If Iran is successful in securing nuclear weapons, that is an absolute strategic disaster.
Iran doesn't deserve a seat at the table. They have been for a long time a rogue regime, a criminal regime.
We should be under no illusions here that this conflict between Israel and Hamas is simply about an Israeli-Palestinian land dispute. Yes, there's elements of that, but by and large, it's a much larger conflict driven by the destabilising acts of a country like Iran.
Iran has to stop sponsoring terrorism and it's learnt a pretty bloody lesson from the sponsoring of terrorism that it's been doing since the 7th of October 2023. But they need to know they will not be allowed to go ahead with the nuclear weapon. And the Americans and the Israelis have made it clear they will destroy Iran's nuclear facilities if they keep going down this path.
Iran is probably somewhere between a week or maybe a few months away from being able to build a nuclear weapon itself. Israel has one chance now. It can attempt to degrade that Iranian capability quickly, or by Christmas, New Year, Chris, Iran will have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, so don't listen to anyone who's pretending this came out of nowhere. Don't pretend this is an act of Israeli aggression. And also don't pretend it's got nothing to do with Australia. Because Iran exports terrorism and its terrorist tentacles have reached all the way to Australia. And Iran is backed by Russia, and it's part of the China, Russia and North Korea axis that's destabilising the global order as we speak. So this matters to all Western nations. Yet listen to our government.
Australia, of course, I've expressed before our concern about Iran gaining the capacity of nuclear weapons as something that is a threat to security in the region. But we, along with other like-minded countries, do want to see that priority on dialogue and diplomacy.
Really? Isn't the point here that dialogue and diplomacy have failed to stop Iran exporting terrorism or from pursuing nuclear weapons? Shouldn't Albanese's first point on this be to demand that Iran ends its nuclear weapons program? He says he sees the threat, but he's got no plan to deal with it. Israel does. Penny Wong is even worse.
I directly put to the Iranian Foreign Minister, we are saying to you, exercise restraint, return to diplomacy and dialogue, because continuing to escalate this has consequences for all peoples of the region. And I think that is a position that so many countries in the world are putting to not only the Iranians but also to the Israelis.
This is disgraceful whataboutism, horrible moral equivalence. There is a right side here. There is good and there is evil, and Australia should stand with Israel against evil. Besides, there's our national interest. It's in our national interest to defeat global terrorism and ensure a rogue theocratic state doesn't get nuclear weapons. And how about humanity? Wong and Albanese have spent the past year and a half erroneously suggesting that Israel has deliberately killed innocent civilians in Gaza. They've been wrong, perpetuating falsehoods, because no army in history has done more to protect civilians than the Israeli army in Gaza these past 20 months. But that's been their suggestion, that Israel has been harming civilians. So why don't they make that distinction now? Israel is clearly targeting Iranian military, nuclear and government facilities. But Iran is firing missiles into Israeli cities, deliberately targeting Israeli civilians. How can it be that Wong and Albanese and the rest of the civilised world don't condemn this outright? Why aren't they calling this out as a war crime? What's their excuse for this moral inconsistency? Is it okay to target Israeli civilians?
Here we can see some of the aftermath in central Israel. Israeli police have said a missile fell in a coastal area causing damage.
Israelis are taking shelter on and off when missiles are incoming in wartime practices that they've become used to over the past couple of decades. In Iran, undercover Israeli agents have infiltrated, with reports that Mossad was able to launch drone and even car bomb attacks against specific military targets and personnel from inside the Islamic Republic. There are also reports that large numbers of Iranians are rebelling and against the government and actually revelling in the attacks against the extremist Islamist regime. And there are senior Iranian figures outside the country now calling for the people of Iran to overthrow the mullahs.
The Iranian people are willing to do their part. In fact, they've done this so many times with no help whatsoever, but they're willing to risk life and limb in order to finally overcome. Last night, people on the streets were angry, chanting death to the dictator yet again. They know who the enemy is.
There are unconfirmed reports that senior Iranian leaders have been flying their families out of the country. So far, the US has not been drawn directly into this conflict, and President Trump is offering Iran the chance to abandon its nuclear ambitions in exchange for peace.
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
Meanwhile, Australians are advised not to travel to Israel or Iran, not that it's easy to enter either country at the moment. In fact, efforts are underway to get Australian visitors out of Israel, including Olympic champion and former Labor Senator Nova Peris, who posted this video from a bomb shelter on the weekend.
All of the Western world, you should be standing with Israel, the Jewish people that love life, that contribute to life, that don't want to take over anyone else's life. This is their land. This is where they belong, and Israel is not going anywhere.
Nova Peris there standing up for Israel while sheltering from Iranian missiles. Israel is far from the pariah state that so many pretend it is. Israel is at the vanguard of the fight against terrorism, against rogue states getting nuclear weapons, and against genocidal and intolerant ideologies. If you stand with humanity, you stand with Israel.